Welcome to Comic Tropes. I'm your host, Chris. Folks, today I have an incredible guest for you. He's been many things. A student who earned his degree in creative writing, a teacher, a Disney cast member, probably most relevant to the show, a comic book writer. He made a huge impact in 2011 on Batman with DC Comics, ushering in the new 52 initiative. That was a critically acclaimed run. In more recent years, he's been doing a lot of creator-owned work, stuff like horror with Night of the Ghoul, epic post-apocalyptic action with Nocterra, more grounded thriller like Dark Space's Wildfire, and many more. Folks, it's my absolute privilege and pleasure to welcome Mr. Scott Snyder. I've read a lot of different interviews with you that talk about how you broke into comics, you know, from getting your degree and you know, doing a little bit of independent work before, you know, working at Marvel and DC around 2009, 2010. But one thing I guess I don't know too much about, at least I didn't see it, was what was your introduction to comics? Like, about how old do you think you were, and what were you initially reading? Like, how did that happen?
That's a great question. I mean, it was always there for me. I mean, I grew up wanting to be a comic book artist. So my parents say they still have my first comics, which, you know, my room looked like I died when I was like 16 or 15 until recently, where everything was like preserved. And, you know, it would create a tremendous amount of cognitive dissonance. Like when I used to stay with them going to New York Comic Con, because I'd go down there and be like, I've actually made it. Look, there's people waiting for my signature. And then I'd go home to like my high school room and I'm like, I'm not this loser anymore. But they had them. It was like, you know, those old oversized Superman versus the Hulk, you know, Batman versus the Hulk. I mean, Superman versus with Spider-Man on the top of the Empire State Building, and those. But I always wanted to be a comic book artist from when I was little. So my dream, you know, was to be, as I got older, Mike Mignola, and I wanted to write and draw my own stuff. My first real sort of, you know, mind-blowing experience after I was already a pretty big comic fan all through, you know, my childhood. I used to go to Forbidden Planet on 11th and Broadway with my dad. I grew up right around there, like every Wednesday, pretty religiously. But was when The Dark Knight Returns. I mean, I was 9, 10 when that came out, and I still have my original 4, where it took me to a different place with the level of seriousness, and it was way above my head. Like, you know, I don't even know that I should have been reading it, but it introduced me to the whole idea of, you know, of Vertigo comics after that, and Sandman and Swamp Thing and all that stuff that was coming out in that time. You know, I was lucky enough to be at that formative age where it was all talking up to me, you know, and talking above my head in a way that made me feel grown up for getting it. And it was a moment when it felt like comics was so rich and sort of had so much literary content, even within the bombast, that it was just fascinating, you know. So that moment for me, that 1986, 1987, 1988 kind of was the real transformative period, where I went from kind of thinking, I want to draw comics, to being like, I really want to write and draw comics, and I see it as a place where I can say things that I care about, all that kind of stuff. So ever since then, I mean, it's all I ever wanted to do. I mean, I had a big kind of rude awakening when I went to college. I went to school in Providence that I could go to RISD in addition to Brown, where I was there for, you know, for university. And the classes didn't line up, and I just realized I wasn't good enough to do art. And it really I didn't know how to break into comics otherwise. I didn't understand at that time really how you wrote for comics without drawing comics. I didn't know how you broke in, so I fell into literary writing more. And then when I found my way back into comics, it was sort of like, oh yeah, this is where I always wanted to be.
But you always had sort of a goal, like you were, I want to get into comics.
Oh yeah, I have. I'll show you. I can show you. I have a portfolio from when I was my son's age, from 15, 16, 17. They're kind of like bad Rob Liefeld copies and that stuff. But ultimately, I mean, I had like a real art portfolio of like, I would go to conventions and ask artists to draw my characters, and they were terrible. It was like I had a character called Vengeance that was like a Punisher ripoff, and he had like a robotic arm, and I had actually spelled Vengeance wrong. This is how wonderfully, you know, on the ball I was at that age, but I spelled it without the A, and my mom was like, you know, you spelled it wrong. And I was like, that's because he writes the A in blood, Mom, afterwards. Thing, you know, and so, yeah, I mean, I was really all about it, you know, always. So yeah, it's
Wow.
strange. Yeah, it's the literary stuff. I love doing that too, but it really made me realize what I love about comics. Honestly, I thought I could do just the writing part, but the lack of collaboration, the fact that you're writing all alone in a room and doing that for months really didn't play well with me, and my own I think struggle psychologically. I'm not built for that, you know, that kind of that total isolation. I've easily fallen to kind of depression and anxiety when I don't have the interaction with other creative people and share something, you know, working on something together as opposed to working it all by yourself. I don't do well with it.
I get it. That makes a lot of sense. I appreciate you sharing. Today, I would argue you're very successful. Obviously, you don't want to like necessarily toot your own horn, but you mentioned New York Comic Con, and I was there, and you and Greg Capullo had a massive line at all times. Like you really, you know, it was a huge turnout. A lot of people want to have a little bit of FaceTime and stuff like that. What was the convention experience like for you? What is a convention experience like for you now? I mean, I'm sure it's a lot different than when you were going as a fan as a kid, but you know, there's a difference, I guess, between just having a table in Artist Alley and having a huge, huge line at all times, like just seeing all these people that want to meet you.
Yeah, I mean, it feels lucky. I mean, I keep waiting for that not to be the case, and I'm fully prepared for when it's not. You know, I never expected, you know, it's strange, Chris. Like I didn't expect to be able to have a sustainable career in comics. You know, I thought that for the first couple of years I broke in, I was so convinced that, you know, I'd get a chance to write one thing and then I wouldn't get another chance for a while, or I'd have to struggle and fall out of comics again. And I didn't know if I'd get another shot. So the idea of having a career, you know, 10, 12 years in, it was so alien to me. And I still, you know, I still kind of wake up, you know, and just sort of shocked by it. So cons, honestly, I mean, I know it sounds hokey, but I'm not bullshitting you. Like cons are really, I enjoy them. I hope that comes through when you see me or Greg, that I like getting to go and say thank you to fans and to actually interact. I mean, I enjoy that aspect of it. You know, I like getting in there and getting a chance to meet people who've read the stuff, and whether they like it or they don't. Sometimes people will wait to tell you they don't, and that's okay, you know, but really? that whole interaction, you know, just getting to say thank you for this job is really is a joy. So I mean, it's
great.
I feel really
is it tiring, or is it like or does it give you energy? Like, you know, what does it feel like?
Yeah, it's not tiring, weirdly, Greg. And it's fun because I happen to, you know, the people that I like working with and that I work with repeatedly, Jock and Capullo and Raphael and Francis Manipal and, you know, and other writers I surround myself with generally, like James Tynan and other people, you know, they have the same sensibility. You know, they're generally people who have that same kind of, I think, attitude, not just about cons, but about being in the industry. You know, I think a lot of us just feel like you get to go to a con as a celebration of the fans. It's a chance to say thank you first and foremost. And then secondly, it's fun to see each other, you know? So, but the first job is to be able to be there for people and give them an experience and make them understand how much you appreciate them showing up, you know? So no, it's not tiring. And honestly, it's invigorating going there. I mean, I need a couple days to recover. I'm old now. I get like, when I started, I could go all night and go out, you know, see fans all day, then go out all night. And now I'm like, I'm in bed by 11 and I'm wiped out.
I'd love to jump back towards the beginning of your career in comics. One of the very, very, very few comics that Stephen King has ever written was the backup in the initial arc of your book, American Vampire. But I couldn't find, how did you get him to agree to work on a comic? I mean, I know he respects comics, but how did that happen?
Well, it was weird. I knew him from the literary world. The way I knew him from books was that um, I went to graduate school in New York City, and his son Owen wound up being in the same class as me, and we were friends. I didn't know Stephen King was his father. Actually, I remember pretty vividly the moment I found that out. And I met, Joe also is a friend, Joe Hill.
Yeah.
But I was hanging out with Owen, and we were out at my parents have like a cabin in Pennsylvania, and we were walking on the road, and he was like, a car went by, and he was like, oh yeah, I don't like walking on the road. My dad got hit by a van. I was like, oh, like Stephen King. And he was like, yeah, my dad. I was like, what do you mean your dad? He's like, I'm from Maine. I look like him, don't I? And I was like, but
so you've known him for quite a while before you figured that out?
I did. Yes. For at least a couple of weeks that we were friendly before. But the point is, so he was very kind and supportive right. when we were all starting out, and he had written a blurb, or he had written like he was supportive of the early stories that I had done and all of that stuff.
Voodoo Heart. I remember he like definitely gave. So he put it in like an anthology put together.
He gave me a blurb for it, which was above and beyond. And I didn't ask. I would never have gone to him for that. And he offered to do it, and he was just wonderful. Like he couldn't have been like a nicer, more supportive person in our atmosphere. And I never wanted to impose or any of that stuff. But when American Vampire went through, what happened was I sold the series to Vertigo, and I was so excited. And I went to him and I said, they asked me if I could get any blurbs or any press, and I hate to ask you, and I wouldn't ask for anything, but do you mind writing like a sentence if you like it, only if you like it, the pitch, just sure. saying that you think it could be a good series, even one sentence would make my year. And he's like, send it over. And so I sent it over, and then he read it, and he was like, well, actually, I like this enough that I'd write an issue of it. And I was like, I can't tell them that unless you're really serious. And he's like, no, I've always wanted to write a comic. I'll do it. And I'm like, I can't believe I sold it before I had Stephen King involved, because I sold it for very little money, very little, all that stuff. But, and then I remember leaving them a message at it was when the office was already closed on a Friday. It was 6 o'clock. And I was like, hey guys, I have good news. I spoke to Stephen King, and he says that he'd be willing to actually write an issue of American Vampire. And it was like Monday morning, 9:01, I got a call from Karen Berger, like everybody on speaker in the office, just like, did you say that Stephen King said he would write an issue of that? So it really it was an incredibly lucky thing. I mean, I was very privileged. He was a very amazing co-writer. And the thing that was fascinating about watching him, other than the terror of being like, this is amazing, and then being like, having the realization that like you're writing your first comic alongside Stephen King, who's going to be exponentially better than you, and nobody's going to like your part, and everybody's going to drop it the minute he leaves, was that the upside of it was the wonder of watching him when he could have phoned it in and still done something awesome.
Yeah,
really invest. Like he was only supposed to do one issue. His part was supposed to end, if you read the series at all, anyone out there, basically around where his issue 2 ends, when Skinner comes out of the coffin underwater. And instead he wrote this whole arc for not just Skinner, but for Abelina and for Book and for all these characters. And he refused to take any equity. All he would take in the series, he took the lowest legal page rate he could make as like a freelancer. And he literally wrote 5 scripts, 100+ pages, with all this detail that didn't even make it in there. I'd love to publish them one day if he's up for it, but it's like down to the wagon wheels and the kinds of guns used. I mean, he put every detail in there, so it was so rich that watching someone like him like live in the world of the story and inhabit it and get lost in it was a joy. And it also gave me a very big lesson about the kind of writer, if I ever made it, if I ever was in a position of power at all, that I would want to be, towards up and comers behind me. And it was incredible. It was just very inspiring to see someone who really went out of his way.
It forward as well as working hard.
Yeah, and he's always been that way. He always, not just to me, but I see it all the time. He's always supporting up and coming people. He's always blurbing people's books that are new. He's always talking about stuff he loves. I mean, he sets an incredible example of the kind of person you want to be in the writing community, I think, too.
Absolutely. His work ethic, I mean, who can even compare to that? Like literally, like anywhere. His work ethic is amazing. He has every reason to potentially retire, but he's still just cranking out books all the time. Let me jump forward a little. The New 52, your Batman run, acclaimed. I'm allowed to say that, and you have to just accept that is fact. But what's interesting is now we're so far past the New 52 that a lot of the editors and stuff that were working on it have started talking about the behind the scenes. And it certainly sounds like there was a fair amount of chaos at DC at the time in terms of they didn't necessarily, the editors specifically, necessarily know what they wanted to do long term with the New 52. What was your experience like, though? Because you had a book that was coming out and doing very well with both like readers and critics and stuff, while all of this sort of behind the scenes chaos must have been happening. Did you encounter any of that, or what was your experience like?
I mean, I did. I encountered a lot of it. I mean, but it really was more, I was like, imagine that you're on like the World Series Yankees or something, and you're like the rookie who's just happy to be there. Like that was my experience. Was like, I was having a complete nervous breakdown basically all year long because it was Batman and I felt like so ill prepared. I mean, my experience in comics, when I was in books, I got rejected a lot. I have like drawers of rejections and all them. I got, magazines, everything, agents, editors, all that. That's where I developed a thicker skin, was in that world, was sending short stories out, not hearing for months, and then getting, form letter, all that kind of stuff. When I got into comics, I really lucked out. I mean, I had no hardship. The door was opened, and then I, like Mr. Magoo, stumbled onto the best opportunities possible. I sold American Vampire, and then within a month, they asked me if I wanted to do the backups in Detective. Yeah. After I turned down a couple things first that I thought would be the end of my career. I turned down Firestorm and The Spectre because it was a take that I wasn't into. And I thought, well, they're not going to give me any more work, but at least I have American Vampire. And then all of a sudden they were like, do you want to do the backups on Detective? And I did that. And then while I was about to start, Paul Dini, who was doing the features, left to do animation stuff. And they just gave me the whole book because I think they were so focused on Grant, I think, and Tony Daniel at the time, that I just felt they kind of, Detective flew under the radar. So it was almost like, let this kid, who cares? Like, just he can't screw it up that bad. And so, that whole experience was, again, like I felt like so out of my league, so out of my league the whole year. And I was just getting comfortable at the end of that year, feeling like, what, I think I got it. Like, I think I've at least figured out how not to feel like I'm screwing up every page. With Dick Grayson on Detective Comics, when they were like, do you want to move over to Batman? We really like to move you there. And I was like, maybe if I can bring Jock and Francesco, and it's still Dick Grayson. And at first that was the assumption. And then all of a sudden the New 52 came and they said, actually, we need you to be with somebody you've not worked with Greg Capullo, and it's going to be Bruce Wayne. And I was like, I don't know if I can do that. And it's going to be Batman #1. And that just like completely threw me off, everything about it. So my experience was like, I mean, there were quite a few times I went to my wife and I was like, I don't know if I can handle this stress like of this. And I this is not what I signed up for. And, I loved the story we were doing. I loved Court of Owls. And Greg and I had a really rocky start that we joke about all the time, where I was kind of an asshole. I mean, I was just terrified. So I sent him these like long scripts, and he was like, I like to work for more outline. And I couldn't do it. And so he was like, I'm running out of paper and ink, kid. You keep sending me these scripts that are 40 pages long. You know, he's like, I'm not going to Staples again. So you better, you know, that, and I was just like, you're not respecting the way I work. And he was like, you're not respecting the way I work. And he was right. But the point is, once we got over that initial hump, and we laugh about it a lot now, I fell in love with his stuff so fast because I saw quickly we had the same priorities, which was, you know, same thing. I like to surround myself with people creatively who don't care at all about if their idea is better or my idea is better, or we have whatever makes the story better, we go for that.
Okay.
And people that are obsessive about making sure that something is as good as it can be and are always wanting to grow as creators as well. And it was clear that was Greg from Go. Greg wasn't phoning it in. Greg was there to change and to become someone that was going to really leave a mark on Batman. And that's how I felt. So, but I felt like, you know, but in that space, I mean, I was so horse blinders, like head down. It was like being picked. I've said it before, but it was like being picked from single A baseball and then being picked to pitch in Game 7 of the World Series. And you just feel like how I can't say no. And at the same time, I'm going to humiliate myself in front of, you know, hundreds of thousands of people. And so the fact that it hurt everything, my marriage, I wasn't the best dad. I felt like, you know, I wrote about it in Witches, but I felt like I was just, every minute went to making sure that had guardrails and could not, at least wouldn't be awful. I didn't know if it was good, but I had to make sure I didn't screw this up. And so that, a lot of what was happening with the New 52 initially kind of flew over my head because I was so nose to the grindstone with Greg, and that was it. Everything was all day sending back and forth. James Tynan was a godsend to me. He was like my best friend through that period as a writer, just helping me along with Greg. But the two of them, just James reading everything I did, checking it, making sure that as a comic fan it worked. Like, so that, I mean, when I look back on the New 52 now, about a year in, I could start to really see the more macro issues with it and the problems with it. My first year or so on it was just intensely that. It was just, how do I make a book that isn't going to embarrass me in front of, you know, a city's worth of people? So once I got past that, I think my biggest gripe and the thing that was frustrating about the New 52 was something that was more systemically, I think, a problem at DC for that whole decade, which is that you could never get a plan and stick to it for long. It was always a radical zigzag. It was like, it was this strange tug of war between going after fans with sort of fan service and nostalgia, or upsetting them to a degree that they had to sort of tune in. And there wasn't a good balance a lot of the time. And the New 52 certainly was that kind of, let's do something that's going to throw away everything and start over. And there was problems with that. I think there was a lot of ways that it could have been something that made everybody happier. At the same time, I loved it because there were so many exciting books. There was weird ones from I, Vampire and Animal Man to was great. You know, Grant Morrison on Action. I mean, there were so many cool things happening that it was almost like a buffet of awesome stuff, even though the underpinning of it, of erasing history, was upsetting to me. And we made a big point on Batman to try and leave and on Swamp Thing, to leave these Easter eggs that said history's still there, at least in our corner of Gotham. We're doing our best to show that all the, you know, it was a deliberate decision to show all the Robins, all that stuff. So, but my issue with it, to speak frankly, was that, you know, and I think that this has gotten worse over time, not because of people there, but I think it's gotten harder to make a longer plan because of the way that the company keeps getting swallowed by bigger and bigger megalodons, where it's like Warner Brother. When I started, we were in New York in the bullpen here on 53rd Street, and it was very New York publishing. Within a couple of years, Warner Brothers was moving everybody out to LA. And that, you know, that was disruptive because then people don't know who their new bosses are going to be. They don't know what the initiatives are going to be. They don't know if there's going to be more focus on branding or TV or what it is. And then after that, you're bought by AT&T, and then you don't know if the focus is going to shift. And then you're bought by Discovery Plus. You don't know if the focus is going to shift. And so, again, without blaming anybody or, you know, making it sort of a shade throwing thing,
No,
And
just curious
I
what
mean,
your experience is.
yeah, I mean, and look, I have my issues with Dan. I have my issues with Jeff. We had our issues, you know, in general. But it's not even about that so much as it was about nobody. There wasn't an ability, whether it was because of the leadership or it was because of the environment, to create a long-term story or plan that would allow for all the kind of multifaceted moves that you need to do to get all the kinds of fans in the tent that you want. Like, for example, if there was a story with the New 52 that wasn't that, like, Flashpoint was happening and New 52 was not a plan, and then all of a sudden it was like, okay, let's do New 52 and we'll use Flashpoint to do it. The problem with that was there was no story as to why the New 52 was what it was. They tried to sort of retroactively put this Pandora stuff and that story onto it as a, well, there's a reason. And then the Doomsday Clock Rebirth tried to say, well, it was, but there wasn't a kind of plan from the beginning. And if the plan from the beginning was there and said, listen, we're going to erase history, but we're going to do a one-shot called New 52 #1. And in that, we're going to show that there's a mystery as to why it rebooted. And maybe the original Superman is out there somewhere, but we don't know where, and we don't know who did it and why. And it's a mystery, but we allow fans to understand that this is part of a larger story and that the old continuity exists somewhere in mysterious cosmic space and will eventually crash into this and we'll do something that's a huge epic narrative. That's all it takes to get them excited about taking a risk in this New 52. It's those kinds of plans that we're missing. It was like, it was always the kind of, then with Rebirth, as good as Rebirth could be, it was so corrective to the New 52 that it did the same thing where it kind of backpedaled so fast away from some of the exciting stuff happening in DCYOU and DC New 52 that it was always whiplash. That's what I mean, was my frustration at DC during the 10 years I was there, if I had to name like one of the, if not the biggest thing, then one of the biggest things, was that you couldn't, I was viciously protective of our neighborhood of books because it was just, you couldn't make a larger plan when it came to, you watched people above you in power not able or wanting to make a plan that they could stick to for 3 or 4 years and have that patience of saying, this year we're going to take some mitigated risks by changing these books in terms of doing epic stories that really push these characters to these exciting places. And then next year, we're going to come this way and do something that brings back these classic characters in a surprise way. And we're going to hold that. And whatever happens sales-wise, we're going to hold that for 2 years and see how it goes, because people will, you know, and you have little ways of boosting sales if you need, but ultimately you're going to stick to the meta narrative.
It gives you a structure to hang things on if you've got a plan.
That's all it is.
There's no structure, then retroactively you look at it and it might not work.
There was never, that was my issue, is that I was frustrated that so many of the things that we did or that were done before you know, when I was kind of coming up, you'd look up and see, well, wait, why are we doing this? Well, we're doing it because it's going to work right now, but what's it going to do to us in a year if we don't stick to the plan we had? And, you know, there was a plan that every year we were going to do a New 52. We were going to kill 10 books or 12 books and start whichever ones were the bottom sellers, and then start 10 to 15 new books. And that's an exciting plan, you know, even a publishing plan. But once the trades did well enough on that original New 52, even on the low selling books, they didn't want to kill the books. So then it wound up, the point I'm trying to make is that whether it was publishing decisions, but especially with creative story decisions, it was difficult to have a consistent architecture, like a plan that you could say, listen, this is what we're doing over the next couple of years. Here's the kind of big touch points. Here's the kind of big events or the big things we're going to do. We're going to lean this way this year and this way next year, and there'll be something for everybody. And we're going to really get them in the door because we're going to try some cool shit. That was never it. It was always like, what's happening next month? What event is going to pop up in that? And that's something I think is being corrected now. You know, I think I see it more. There's more runway. But yeah, that was my frustration. The New 52 to me was very chaotic in that regard. Once I got out of my own foxhole and kind of saw what was happening around me more over the second and third year, I think it was exacerbated in those years as the glow of the New 52 started to wear off, I think it got much more chaotic about what are we doing, as opposed to, hey, there was a plan, you know?
Yeah. No, thanks for sharing that. That's just interesting to hear somebody's perspective who was in the middle of it, but who had a book that, like, was doing some new things with Batman in terms of. I felt like the character and the city and the supporting cast were very accurate. It felt right, but you were giving Batman some sort of new fears and new problems to deal with, and that can't be easy when a character has been around this long. So it was a good read.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
It's sincere. And just to be clear, I actually wasn't really reading it back when it was new. I discovered it more recently. So it's interesting to like read it now and just be like, oh, this is a good read. The New 52, I tried to get into at first, and it sort of pushed me out of DC for just a little while, just a little while. So I've sort of come and discovered, like, your Batman run more recently, and I like it. It's amazing.
And I mean, it was there was a moment when I felt like when we did 0 years, when I sort of shifted over from
that was good
being really afraid of being a Batman writer and writing about sort of Batman dealing with my fears of the legacy and the history, which is the Court of Owls, and then sort of my fears about being a dad and death of the family, to sort of thinking of him for my kids, rebuilding him from the ground up, to say, I don't want to just make stories that, I think are strong given my fears for myself, but I want him to be a hero in a new way in the face of the things they're afraid of, all the strange things that aren't the fears I grew up with in the 80s, but instead
it has to still be something that we as readers can relate to and like recognize as a real fear and stuff like that. So when you talk about, say, like, the fear of parenthood and stuff, I think that's, books like, say, Witches bring that right to the forefront.
Thanks.
Or, when I read something like Nocterra, some great world building and stuff. But what really hooked me with issue 1 was the fact that our main character has a very personal reason for going outside of, like, her bubble, like what her world is, for family. And I'm like, okay, well, we can all understand, like, taking a risk for somebody that we care about, like that's the only thing that would, like, sort of really change your direction in life, is like doing something for family. So I appreciate that your characters always seem to have a relatable set of fears or concerns. That's something I really enjoy about when I read your books, is I feel like, okay, as fantastical as it might be, I can latch on to something the characters are doing and recognize something real within that.
Thanks. I appreciate you saying that. And I'm curious, just going back to, not to sort of get off on a sort of tangent.
Yes, we can't do that.
Well, I'm curious, like, because I've been thinking about this a lot lately, and I would love your opinion as well as anyone watching. Like, I'm of the mindset that right now, like, it would be fun to have something big, like superhero comics. It almost feels like, the movies did such a good job of creating this interconnected epic universe, especially, in the last few years, that,
sure.
And they can't really restart right now, because their DC has all of the kind of Justice League and now Black Adam connected to that. And Marvel has the entire MCU, and they're all they're mining a lot of the secondary characters in great ways, from She-Hulk to Titans to all this different stuff.
Mm-hmm, sure.
But it's almost like the superheroes are so ubiquitous in other media that, comics, it's not that we've been beaten at our own game, but you can find them in so many places. And the issue is almost like we do have the ability to do mega events where we make people turn around and say, like Rebirth in the New 52 and those things that are risk-taking and make you look at the characters in new ways and ignite feelings of kind of classic legacy love of some characters, and also change some things about newer characters or legacy characters in ways that excite you if it's story-based, and say, listen, this character is taking on a mission you wouldn't expect and doing this, or facing a new villain, whatever it is. But I'm of the mindset that we could, if there was ever a time to make like a big move in comics, that kind of, Marvel DC versus DC, sure, but there's too many like problems with that to seem to get that through.
A lot of lawyers would be involved.
Yeah, well, I just wish we would do something right now that is like New 52 level, Rebirth level, out of control, out of control thing. Because I feel like
something like that is more likely to generate these days. It's just my impression, from creators deciding to collaborate on something than from like a company initiative.
That's what I mean. I mean, like, because when they asked me about coming back or that stuff forever, that's the kind of stuff I would love to be a part of right now. If I went back to DC or was it Marvel, something that was seismic that way, where you get to be able to get people back in the store. Because I just feel like, so many people like discovered comics. The people can argue all they want. The fact is, like, comics during the pandemic or before the pandemic and after the pandemic now have been doing really well. American comics been doing really well. Indie comics,
both new issues and back issues. You're right, mainstream and independent. It's all shown growth, which is
nice. Shown a ton of growth. But the issue is now that we're going into a more of a bear market, in globally, like in life. The question is, how do you keep them in the store, and how do you excite them in a way that's going to invite them to want to bring their kids in? Kids want to bring their parents back. That whole thing. How do you do something that's about everybody coming back to the shop? To me, that requires a level of kind of calculated risk and big, epic storytelling. Big story.
And commit to it. And commit to it, because the only way to see if it works is to like sort of complete the test, not do it halfway.
That's exciting to me, though. That's the kind of stuff like I love rolling around in my head as a thought experiment, being like, what would I do? What would I do?
If you were the decision maker?
Yeah. If it was like, how would I tell a story that I think speaks to all the priorities of superhero comics, about why they're so great, what they're about, and why they also are important right now, how they grow, how you create the biggest tent, all that stuff at once.
Yeah, that is an interesting thought experiment, actually, Scott. But I feel like, no matter what the event is, there's always a few titles that are really excellent and a few that are kind of like average. It more depends to me on how much freedom a creative team gets and how passionate they are, because it will ultimately be in the execution. So like how much of like sort of like a space can we carve out for somebody to really play with this and not have to feel obligated to interrupt their story with like event stuff. Like, like it becomes, I don't know. I'm glad I don't have to be an editor for event stuff where I'm saying like, okay, in issue 5, by the way, you have to like cross over with Wonder Woman, and by issue 12, you have to do a Green Lantern 2-issue arc because this is happening over there.
I know what you mean. There's a lot of keeping the trains on the tracks, but there's also, I don't know, when we did Metal and Death Metal, I mean, those were Metal was sort of contained and then Death Metal was bigger, but but
it happens a little bit organically, what you're describing, like because the first one was sort of its own like 6-issue thing, then you could organically grow that into something bigger. I mean, going back to like, more the 80s and 90s that we were talking about reading comics, something like Infinity Gauntlet arose very organically out of the run on Silver Surfer, and you had like a 6-issue, and then they were able to sort of make the sequels, not that they were like quite as good, but they were able to fairly organically make it bigger because you'd already established something. It was
well, that I just mean that, like, not coming in and having something top down driven by company initiative or editorial, but having creators get together and say, listen, what do we want DC or Marvel, but what I'm speaking DC because I'm there, in general, like, what do we want to say about our company and our characters for 2023 or 2024? What do we want them?
I like that.
What values, what things do we want to be saying to people about why these characters are great, why comics are great, why they should be back in the store? And this is where you have the absolute biggest budget, nonstop, epic, robust storytelling, most bombastic, most hard on your sleeve, most like there's nowhere you can get bigger, more soapy, wonderfully, out of control, ludicrous storytelling than comics. How do you embrace that and say, all right, we're going to tell you a story you've never heard before, and shock you, but make you love it too, I don't know. It's
I feel like the things that tend to excite me the most these days are when I feel like I can focus on just that story. And if we're talking about DC, an example might be more Wonder Woman Dead Earth was just this amazing
Yeah.
4-issue story that Daniel Warren Johnson did that really I felt did cut to the core of who Wonder Woman is by putting her in a different scenario. And I don't know that you could have necessarily done that in a monthly title necessarily. It would have, I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I think above all, like there's room for those stories are crucial, like Lonely City, and which is one of my favorite books in years. And I loved Dead Earth, and I wrote Daniel about it. I loved Rogues by Josh Williamson. Like those Black Label books are crucial and key. And those are evergreen like publishing works. But they're also in the main line needs to be, in my opinion, some level of sort of kind of interaction and collective storytelling at certain points.
It's fun. It can be fun.
I think that it's almost like that model of this, like where you come together to restate your priorities and do something that gives everybody incredible storytelling opportunities and new sort of elasticity in their book because of the way that an event or a big storyline opens up possibility. And then you go back out and be able to do your books organically in a space that gives everybody room to be singular and individuated.
Sure.
And then 2 years later, whatever it is, you come back and do it again, 3, whatever's, but that sense of coming back to the well of, or the trunk of the tree to do something to show how strong and it is that there's I don't know. I think it's an interesting moment for that kind of storytelling. If you could do it in the way the New 52 or Rebirth kind of really went all in, and said, everybody's a part of this for a moment, and then everybody can go back out and do everything they want to do because of the opportunities it provides in different ways,
Well, I can tell that you still got a lot of passion for these characters and this type of storytelling and stuff, even though you've been doing a lot of like creator-owned stuff these days.
I have, yeah.
Would you be able to walk us through this? Like, would you be able to explain to us maybe what a typical work day is like for you in terms of how you structure it and what you actually do each day for like the work day?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of it is, having kids now. My workday is really boringly conventional. I mean, when I was at DC, same thing. Like DC, I think one of the things that was when you're working on licensed characters, for anybody that's an aspiring creator out there, my friends and all, like Williamson and all of us, like joke, Tom King and Taylor, and that working on a licensed book like Batman or Wonder Woman or any of that, it sort of takes the energy of 3 creator-owned books for each one, because there's a lot to manage. There's sort of, the process of getting something approved, the process of then sort of working over it with your editor, the process of then having it approved within the group so that other books that attach to it understand what you're doing, or even if you're a peripheral book, the issue of then dealing with publicity and marketing and all of that stuff. There's a lot of meetings and a lot of back and forth. So working on DC, there's a lot of phone calls, a lot of, back and forth emails, a lot of Zooms, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, you're very plugged. Every character has a lot of strings. Doing my own stuff, and I said, I'm going to give it 10 years if I can make it that long. When I was about 5 years in to DC, and I was like, if I can tell the biggest stories I want, like metal and death metal. And at the end of that, I don't want to stay here for the money or stay here for, the safety of it. I really need to get out and do my own stuff. And was very lucky and grateful to be able to get a chance to do that, both at Comixology and at Image and IDW, and just so now, like, my job is I'm working on, way more books than I've ever worked on before, but I'm way less stressed, honestly, and less I don't know, just they're much more effortless to do because it's just you and your co-creators making things. So my day is generally, I get up, 7 o'clock, 7:30.
Okay.
So we split the kids up. I take the 3-year-old to school, and my wife takes the other 2 to school, the 15-year-old and the 11-year-old. And I'm back here working by 8:30, 8:45. And I really do work pretty much from 8:45, 9 to 3, 4, 5 o'clock, depending on the day and when I go get the kids. And in the old days when I was at DC, I used to then usually do a second shift of work after they were asleep at like 10 or 11. But now in this space, I can manage it a little bit better, and I have like a little more family time at night, which is important to me, as I'm getting older and they're getting older. So it's a really typical work day. I'm in this office. When we had Quinn, our 3-year-old, that was the thing. I was like, can I build a studio out of the house, for having a kid? And my wife was okay with it. So I built like this little studio outside our house is just across the way. And
okay.
Yeah, this is my office. I'm just in here working, and that's it. I'm like really, really sort of boring.
So you are able to sort of section off that work-life balance, like like there's home life and there's work life, and like some of us that have to go into an office and stuff. Yeah, you actually.
And for aspiring creators, I mean, I would just like really reiterate how important it is to delineate those things as much as you can. I think the longest running problem in my relationships in life was my inability the first few years at DC, especially to sort of separate out work. I was always in my work head thinking all the time. And a lot of that was just anxiety about Batman and those things. But being able to draw physical and emotional lines between this is where I work and this is where I'm present with my family or my friends or my partner or whatever, those things it makes your work so much better, at least in my opinion, like because it allows you to enjoy it more when you come there and say, this is now I'm doing this, as opposed to I'm constantly rolling that Rubik's Cube over in my head of how do I solve this plot problem. It doesn't mean you won't do it. I still do it. Like I'll be driving to school thinking like, but I mean, it's not the same sort of obsessive all the time. There's no escape from it feeling. So yeah, I think at this point in my, because I mean, like, look, this is the truth, Chris. Like those first years, I was pretty self-destructive in a lot of ways. I think when I was starting out on Batman and Detective, but really on the first year or two of Batman, I mean, there was part of me I think that was really looking to get fired because I was just so stressed out all the time. As much as it was my dream job, I really had. I mean, James will tell you, but like, I had a lot of panic attacks, a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, where I was just would picture, they'd tell me, guess what? The sales hit 150 or 200,000 people, which is, for me, was unthinkable. But then my reaction was to picture, a giant coliseum of like 200,000 people getting ready to boo me if they didn't like, this panel. And every line, every panel, every page, I would litigate that way in my head of, God, are they gonna hate this or that? And I didn't change it. I still did it. Like, meaning I never tried to change it to make them like it. But that worry that what I was doing and I loved and would, cared about was gonna not go over well was always there. Even if I knew it wasn't gonna go over well, I'd still do it. I still wouldn't change it if I loved it.
Yeah.
But,
I feel the same thing here on YouTube, and as compared to getting like, like, I don't know, an email or checking like your own name or something, there's comments on every video like that'll let you know if somebody doesn't like you or something like that. So yeah, you can get a lot of abuse and you have to get a tough skin. Oh yeah, I still have that quote. It was like a letter somebody mailed in after year one. And it's like, I'm dropping this book forever. You've ruined Batman. Like, it's too dark, and I want you to know you've lost like a loyal customer, and it's an abomination. And I have it on my my thing, and the other I have a Xerox that's really funny. But that, I mean, like, we all get that. I mean, that's one thing to understand. Again, I try to do a lot of talking to aspiring creators now. I think leaving DC and I love DC again. Like I want to go back, and I love the people there, and I love the characters. So this isn't like, oh, it was bad there, it's good now. But leaving and being able to be my own boss and make stuff with people that inspire me in a maybe less constrained way, with doing the books we're doing at Comixology, from We Have Demons and Clear and Night of the Ghoul and all those books, and then being able to do Nocterra at Image. Really got me, I feel like, reconnected me with my priorities about just making things that you love without worrying about
how to manage them through the channels internally to get them approved and all of that, where you could just make them and enjoy it.
That's
And
nice.
that really led me back to teaching, which was something that for me was always a big part of my life creatively up until the last few years at DC, where I just couldn't manage it on top of the stress of the events and doing all that stuff. And so having that now, you know, being able to do that through Substack and having a class it's been such a great math, Chris, of like being able to make things that you love, not worry about, you know, the pressures of what people, the expectations that people have about characters because you're making the characters up, and then getting to try and reconnect with your own priorities and go out there and teach things that, you know, you love talking about. That it's just I feel it's been the happiest and best time in my career this last couple of years. And it's not that I was unhappy. Again, like I talk about being self-destructive those first years at DC, but things leveled out for me by the time we were a couple of years in. And I had a lot of come to God kind of, you know, wake up calls from friends being like, listen, you know, you're this whole, because what I would do self-destructively was like, you know, I'd pick an editor or Dan DiDio or someone would come and say, I know we promised you could do this, but you can't do it on the book. And something like offensive in that way. And the level of vitriol and fight that I would have with the bosses over that was definitely fireable at times, where I would be like, you know, well then you know, like, yeah, you're a terrible boss. And like that kind of.
Really?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, like, you know, I was definitely, I mean, not never to anyone. I was not like a nasty to people like my editors or anyone, any of my co-creators. It was always like yelling up at the people that I, you know, the people that could fire me. That's who it was like, you know, it was like Bob and Dan and, you know, Jeff or whoever it was, you know what, like this is, and I always felt, I mean, I had good reason. There wasn't any fight I ever picked that I don't stand by why I was, you know, legitimately angry.
Yeah.
But the disregard for the kind of channels and the kind of way to be like, you know what, then fire. I don't care. Just fire me. I don't care. You know what I mean? Like that first couple of years like that, there was definitely a part that I think was just like looking for the relief of not being under that pressure. And it was like Tom Brevoort actually over at Marvel, who what happened was, and forgive me if you've heard that, I've told the story maybe a couple times, but it was like maybe right around 2012, I think. Yeah. Like when I was a couple years in, when I was really at my worst, where I was like, just finishing Court of Owls and on Death of the Family. And I just felt like, what am I doing? And, you know, like, it was the pressure was just so, I just felt the pressure because Batman was doing well and I didn't know how to handle it. And I was at the party for DC in New York City at New York Comic Con, and Dan was telling me that he was retracting. He was going back on something he had promised. I don't remember what it was, but it was something that I really cared about, you know, this could be 6 issues. Now it has to be 4 issues, like that kind of a thing. And it's not like he was being an evil person. It's just, it happens in comics, but it was, you know, I was upset. And I remember yelling and saying at the party, you know, like, this is terrible. And this is why I don't think you're a good boss. And this is da-da-da and da-da-da. Oh, yeah. And it was like at the party. So it was like, you know, there was people. And Will Dennis and Lee Lowridge were like, get out of here. Come on. Just, this isn't worth it. Like, just stop, you know, stop yelling about stuff. And I'm like, fine. And I left and I went across town to the Marvel party because I was like, I'm going to go blow, you know, just see friends and blow off steam and go over there. Okay. And it was only 10 blocks away, but by the time I got to the Marvel party, everyone turned and they were like, we just heard you got into a physical fight with Dan DiDio at the DC party.
It's a small industry, isn't it?
Well, that was the wake up call was like, you know, you might be like playing with fire about maybe I'll get fired, but you really are going to get fired. And you're this is stupid. Like, you're acting like an idiot and you need to, you know, again, there's nothing that I fought about or stood up for that I don't still stand by. But the
passion is good. And it sounds like you were able to somehow find some objectivity in how you were handling things and make some positive changes for yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you, so the next morning, it was Tom Brevoort that called me up, and we knew each other only because we went to the same comic shop out here in Long Island, and I knew him before I broke in. And he called me for no reason other than to be kind and was like, listen, you've got a lot of opportunities and you're throwing them away by you know, this gets around, like, no matter how well you're doing or how good you are or whatever, you know, if you're really this difficult to work with, people aren't going to do it. And it was a big turning point. It was about 10 years ago, you know, and I was just like, you know what, I gotta get my shit together and not be this kind of bad boy of like, well, you know, bosses can't tell me if they promise something, then we're going to get it. And that, you know, that, and I have a lot of things now where I think back on that, you know, I think back on those period, and it's hard. I have a lot of mixed feelings about it, Chris, because on the one hand, I do feel like the environment was such at times that it required that level of that environment. There was a lot of, like you said, chaos in those early 52 years of the New 52, I mean.
Right.
And some of the people in power, there was a lot of pressure on them. There was a lot of fear, and there was a lot of, and so the only way you could sometimes get through, I think, some of the things like that we needed to, if they promised it and then they were trying to take it back or that, was to really get upset and to be like, look, this is not okay. And I'm telling you, it's not okay. At the same time, now I look back and I think about it and I'm like, did that, you know, was there, you know, is that only contributing to the same culture by, even if you're yelling at bosses or whatever it is it, you know, is it something that is, you know, just adding to the stress of that whole culture for everybody. And so I try hard now, you know, I think looking back to, you know, just tell those stories to younger people coming up in the class and through the class and just, you know, any creators I meet that I'm lucky enough to get to know, to just be like, look, you know, be more aware than I was, I think, of if you're in a situation where it feels like the only way you're going to get things through is to really lose your shit in a way, then figure out a way to extract yourself from it, you know, and that, because ultimately it, you know, I don't know if it's a good thing. And then other days I'm like, you know, well, we got the story we wanted and were promised, even though they said no. And I don't know. Now I feel like I'm on the couch being like, what should I, you know, but it's the truth that when you bring up the new 52,
tell me more. What are you dreaming about?
No, I'm just saying, like, the New 52 and that whole period, it's interesting to think back on because, especially now, like I was saying, being outside of the whole matrix, where you're just making stuff for yourself and you're working with people that, you know, you enjoy getting on the phone with, like all of it, I'm really happy. But it makes me reflect a lot on that period and the really great opportunities and good things about that wild period, and also the really negative things, you know, and the things I wish we had done differently as a company, the things I wish I had done differently, the, you know, a lot of the things that didn't get through that you wish had, the stories that weren't told, a lot of it. But then there's this weird sort of overlay, and then I'll stop about it. It's almost feels like a neighborhood you grew up in that was kind of a tough neighborhood in a lot of ways. But then everybody that's there is gone now, you know, and you go back to the neighborhood and you almost have a kind of nostalgia for it, even though you're like, because it's not there anymore. There's nothing, you know, everybody is gone from it. Like, and the offices are gone, everything's gone. So there's a kind of like, I don't know. I look back and I have a lot of mixed emotions about the New 52 and that whole period. I feel very grateful and lucky for the opportunities that afforded me and a bunch of other people that I'm friends with, like Lemire and other people. And at the same time, there were things that I didn't like about the environment. And I didn't like about the planning for it in that way too. And the way some people were treated.
Well, you were successful, but it sounds like you went through a fairly stressful work environment for quite a while. And that's probably going to be with you for a while. That's just informed part of who you are. But what's nice is it sounds like now you've got just enough distance that you can like look back at that and try to be the person that you want to be moving forward. And that sounds great.
I mean, I'm sure I'll still screw it up, but I mean, that's the hope, you know, is like,
we can only try our best with what we know.
Well, you know, I'm surrounded the people I have around me now too. I really like Will Dennis, who's the editor on all our Best Jacket stuff. Like, You know, he was at Vertigo at that time. He ran Vertigo with and approved American Vampire, but he approved 100 Bullets and Why the Last Man, and he was there. They were, and Mark Doyle, and they were there for those years. And so there's a kind of understanding, I think, too, that we want to be in a place where we have a good, positive, healthy, not just relationship with each other, but the environment we're creating for people that we're working with is you know, is supportive and healthy and all of that stuff too. Not that it was so toxic and horrible there. I'm not saying that. It's just there was stresses there that I think were unnecessary, and there were levels of you know, of chaos or kind of of volatility that weren't necessary. It could be avoided, and that's the goal: is to try and have plans, have, you know, make people feel like, you know, there's runway, there's time to talk things through, there's commitment, there's support, all that with our people we're working with. So
I appreciate you sharing some of this creative process and history with us, because, you know, we don't get to hear this other places. It's an interesting look into what actual working on comics is. It's not necessarily all fun. We can be passionate about it, but there's work involved. You've given me a couple things to follow up on here, like teaching and stuff. But before I get to that, one thing I was curious about is, you know, you work with several different publishers right now for your creative own stuff. You know, you've got your Comixology, your IDW, your Image. How do you decide, like, do you do, for instance, like a certain amount for each publisher each day? Or do you say, like, I'm working on this book today and that book tomorrow? Because, you know, these three books that I just happen to have here that are recent examples are all very different tones, because they're different genres.
Yeah.
Like, can you just say, like, okay, I'm doing 2 hours on, like, Dark Spaces today, and now I'm going to switch over and work on, like, Night of the Ghoul? Can you do that? Or how do you?
I need to really isolate a couple days for each book, at least, where I really get into the headspace of that book and I don't work on anything else.
Yeah.
So everybody I work with, like, we all kind of set up those boundaries so that, you know, I'll say, like, this week, for example, I'm working on Nocterra, on the next Nocterra, and that's the book I'm working on for a few days. And after that, I'm going over to Canary, and then I'm doing, like, lettering on Canary and the next issue of Canary. So you try and move a couple pieces forward on each book at a time, and then as much as I can, and then go to another one. So I can't switch creatively. Yeah, I need to sort of silo them for myself.
You know, one thing that's cool about some of your work is you've done a lot of horror and horror-tinged books. I think horror can work great in comics. It's a very different presentation than what you come up with in a book or a movie, but that horror works well because, you know, you've got, like, witches, you've got, like, I would say Black Mirror, Batman story is fairly horror-tinged. Of course, Night of the Ghoul, Nocterra, We Have Demons, they all have, like, horror elements. What's your background with horror? What's your interest in horror, and how do you think horror translates to comics best? Like, what techniques are needed to make it work in comics?
That's a great question. I mean, I've always just loved horror since I was a kid. I mean, I think it's probably comes from being an anxious kid, and again, like, struggling, I think, with anxiety when I was younger, and still, but I mean, like, really not understanding it the way I do now. I think when I was younger and having, you know, really getting panicked and having all kinds of behaviors that I think I used to manage it at the time, like, you know, and so there was a comfort, weirdly, in embracing horror when I was too young to embrace it. There was a video, I told this story, but there was a video store nearby where I grew up on 26th Street and 3rd Avenue called the Video Stop. And they would not rent R-rated movies to kids, but they deliver them. Like, if you knew, yes. So it was like a trick, and everybody in the neighborhood, like, knew about it. So you would rent all these, you know, slasher films. It was the 80s. It was Sleepaway Camp 2 and Pumpkinhead and Silent Night, Deadly Night and all that stuff. But I loved being scared because it felt like a controlled environment to kind of face your fear and then safely come out of that in a way where you'd processed it, or you'd at least confronted it, and you'd made it out okay. And so it became something I just enjoyed from a very young age. I mean, even as I got older and I started to really explore it as a medium. I feel like what I love about it is that it is kind of like the purest form of conflict, you know, horror, where you're not facing a muted version of your own fears the way you are in drama or even in action. A lot of the time you're facing something that's kind of an extension of some psychological barrier or fear that you have, or some kind of like, you know, a villain who's your antagonist who represents the things you're worried about yourself in some way. Horror
can
is
be
like
externalized a lot of times.
Yeah, horror is like if horror is done well, then the monster or the killer is a pure exaggerated extension of the thing you're most afraid of, you know, or he engenders the thing you're most afraid of in yourself or in human nature by virtue of his attack, you know, like zombies. So in that way, horror is this kind of, you know, crystal clear, you know, almost amped up version of conflict where you know your protagonist is facing the thing they're most afraid of in the scariest possible direct way ever. And so there's a kind of purity to that and a kind of extreme high stakes quality that I just love, because there's no beating around the bush. There's no like, let me think about why this matters or why this thing is scary. It's like, it's scary. It's right in your face. It's like all your worst fears right there. So yeah, as somebody who I think was pretty neurotic and second guesses themselves and struggles with, you know, anxiety and depression and those things, I think horror really offered at a young age a very good place to go to kind of look at the things you were afraid to look at in your own life in a controlled environment.
Do you find it at all difficult to crystallize a protagonist's motivation in horror? Just because, like, if we go to some other type of genre, okay, Dark Spaces Wildfire is one of your books, where we've got a chain gang of women prisoners that are working as firefighters, a real thing that you know, fighting wildfires. They each have very different motivations for what they want to do. Maybe it's, you know, being with family or clearing their name, things like that. You know, but you know, when we go to horror, at least initially, it tends to seem like someone just wants to survive. But do you feel like, you know, do you give that some thought, like, as to what a character's primary motivation might be in a story, or like what does the protagonist want?
Oh yeah, I mean that's always where it starts. So like, for example, you know, what I wanted to do with a book like, you know, a horror book like, you know, Nocterra, for example, is the idea comes to you, something will come to you that catches your attention. Like the simplest thing, like it was, you know, looking out and thinking about, well, what if my 3-year-old or when said something about like, well, what if it's not morning yet? And it just kind of sticks with you. Well, what if night never ended? Okay, well, what if it's a night? What's scary about that? Well, you know, what's scary is the sudden change, the things that lurk in the dark. Well, you know what, we're going through a period right now, and then you start unpacking it. So what I do is I start, why does this idea matter to me? Why do I want to spend time with it? And so I sort of figure out, well, what's potent to me about it is this notion of, if a darkness covered the earth and revealed to us the things we don't want to see about ourselves, especially right now at this moment. And so it's like, okay, what if it changes us into these monsters? Okay, well, that's good. I haven't seen that. It gives me this kind of fun background. All right, well, who's the main character? The main character should be somebody, for me then, if I'm worried about my kids feeling like right now they're growing up at a time when there is a darkness that's separating people and seeming to change them into unrecognizable figures, whether it's metaphorical, when it comes to politics, or it's cultural, whatever it is, like they're growing up at a time when it seems like there's more, you know, it's more divisive, it's more polarized, there's less hope, there's less. Then I want a character that represents that thinks that this is actually the way we are, and we just hit it in the light. And so I developed that motivation with Val. I say, okay, well, the main character should be someone that had an experience to prove that to them. What if they grew up in the dark? What if? So it's always about, what does this idea mean to you? Unpacking that. Sorry, I'm like in this beam of sunlight.
Yeah, I know the time's passing. The sun's moving right into your face. I'm sorry.
No, it's good. I'm sorry if it's visually weird for you, but I can move. But the idea is, why is this staying with me? And you unpack that. Well, then, okay, well, it's staying with me because it's about it's a metaphor for things that I think are happening now. Okay, the next step is, well, then how do I create a character that's going to allow me to dig at the stuff that scares me and excites me and speaks to my hopes the most? Okay, well, this is how you build a character that allows you to go right to the heart of that stuff. And that's what I do with drama and horror. So, for horror, that means someone who's going to not want to go out there and risk everything because they feel as though there's nothing. You're not going to find anything on the other side better than what you used to have. And then, what the point of the book, no big spoiler, but is that young people in this world of Nocterra are going to find a way to bring something better than what was there before. That's their hope. And, that's what I hope for my kids. And so that's the process with horror. With something like Wildfires, it's the exact same process. So it's like Wildfires. They heard an article on NPR about a program in California penal system to bring women out to fight wildfires. The thing that caught me about it was the injustice of it, where it was like, well, they make $2 a day and they're risking their lives. And a lot of the time they're protecting the homes of people who aren't
millionaires,
absolute millionaires.
Yeah.
And so it speaks to a moment right now where I think there's more concentration of wealth in the hands of, very few people. And this kind of great disparity. So it's like, well, what if we tell a story about a character who feels as though they've played by the rules their whole life and all they've done is lose? Like, that's that's the main character. And suddenly they have an opportunity in this really extreme situation to provide for the people they care about who have also been dealt a poor hand in life.
Right.
A windfall in the way that people that are, greedy or predatory seem to go after and win half the time. Why wouldn't you do that? And that's a morality tale. So that's what I do. How do I create a character that's going to allow me to explore the thing that excites me about this scenario? The scenario to me is this apocalyptic burning wildfire. It's essentially a product of greed in and of itself, like climate change and all of this that burns 12 months a year at this point, being fought by people that are good people up there that deserve more than they're getting, and they're protecting the interests of people that don't care about them. Well, what if you give them a chance to be as bad as people, or, reverse it. So it's a morality play. And ultimately issue 5 comes out, I think next week, but I'm not sure, but you'll see, like, it has a really a personal message, or personal.
I'm loving it.
Yeah. So I'm very proud of it, in that way. So it's always the same process, Chris. It's like,
okay,
what is this about? And then what character is going to let me in a real emotional, psychological way, get to the material, get to the heart of it, get to the heart of it.
And what do you think works well? I might have my opinions, and I love horror and I love horror comics, but I'm curious, like, what do you think works well horror-wise within comics? As in, if we compare it to, say, like film, you could do a jump scare or show some pretty extreme violence that surprises you. In a book, you can really get into somebody's head because you're making everybody picture everything. You really can build that dread. But like, what do you think is effective within a comic?
That's the key. Is people have I think a higher level of an emotional investment in characters in a book because their own imagination is filling in sort of the most engaged way all the characteristics you're not getting, the sound of the voice, the tone, the way they move, all the things that make that character real, you're forced to create. And so there's a level of relationship, I think, that goes beyond even what you see when you're just receiving all of the kind of visceral signals in a film setting. So you play on that in a book. In a book, I realized over time is that the monster is never going to be quite as scary as what they're imagining. In film, you have more opportunities to make that thing, scary with all kinds of tools, from music or whatever. But the book is about creating emotional attachment to a character that's really in peril, like facing dread. And it's less creating terror than it is creating dread throughout the whole thing. Dread and dread and dread. And then the release of that comes not with like a jump scare, but an emotional and psychological revelation. It's always thinking of it that way. It's what's deeply scary. What's deeply scary is your mother deciding that you're not worth it and sacrificing you because you've really been a mistake in her life. That revelation or something, spoiler witches, but that like, you know, building to that. So building the whole emotional framework of that. Witches are scary, and in the TV thing, they'd be super scary. But here it's that always staying focused on that. That's what I mean. Or reading horror is about being placed in the emotionally terrifying situation of the main character, where it's not about what's popping out at them, about what they're feeling and how their feelings are the nightmares in here, you know?
You've been really generous with your time, and I can tell, like, you know, we're starting to get dry throats, so I'll wrap it up shortly. But I'd love to know one thing before we leave, and that is, and you mentioned it earlier, you've done teaching both in like a college environment and lately, I think last night, even you do it online now and stuff like that. Like, what do you get out of teaching? What do you enjoy about teaching that like makes it worth carving out time, since obviously you're a busy man like writing comics, but you're still taking time to do this? So what do you get out of it?
Oh, I mean, a lot. Like the two things. Like one, I feel like it really reattaches you and reconnects you with your own priorities. Like I can't go in there and say the 2 golden rules of the class. And if anyone's interested, like we do it through a site called Our Best Jacket. OUR, like Our Best Jacket with 2 T's.
I'll put that in the description.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Jacket is a portmanteau of like my first 2 sons' names. We made the company before we had the third, so now I have to figure out how to put a Q in there for Quinn. But anyway, what I get out of it is that first, I can't go in there. The 2 golden rules of the class are the best things I was ever taught, which are: 1, you have to write the story that you would love to pick up and read more than any other that day. That's all that matters. I don't care if it's political. I don't care if it's comedy. I don't care if it's horror. It doesn't matter to me. Memoir, but it has to be the one that would mean more to you to find that day. And the second rule is try to always be the most exciting writer to yourself possible. That's it. Those are the sort of twin rules for the class writing wise. There are rules about workshopping other people's stuff and that, but those are the priorities. And so working from those priorities, I can't go home and then be hypocritical about that. When I spend an hour or 2 hours a month really showing aspiring writers why I think something is sticking to those priorities, or talking about when a book really is doing something inspiring for its daring and its boldness, I can't really go home and then be like, well, I'm going to phone it in. It constantly reminds you of those fundamental principles that I think you need sometimes to familiarize yourself with over and over again. And then secondarily, maybe even more importantly, you know, I've been given a lot of opportunities in this field. You know, I feel really lucky. And one of the fun things, there's really no better feeling, honestly, as corny as it sounds, but it's just true. And, you know, people out there with kids, you know, I'm not lying, but when you have a chance to contribute to somebody else's, you know, journey as a writer at all, for me, like whether, you know, James Tynan was my student as an undergraduate, you know, even all the way back then. But Amy Chu and Phil Kennedy and Matt Rosenberg and, you know, all these different people that I had a chance to be in class with in one, you know, and I probably learned more from them than they learned from me. But when you're able to kind of contribute or be a part of anything like that, and then the person that you had in your class becomes someone you're learning from and look up to as a creator now, there's no better feeling. It's like the feeling of seeing James Tynan doing work that makes me feel like I got to learn how to do that is so invigorating. It just makes you feel, it's like, it feels the same way it feels when you've done something and on the page. It's better than the feeling sometimes on the page that you're proud of, because you feel like even if your contribution was minuscule and they didn't need you even necessarily, you're part of that story of the creation of this incredible writer who's doing something that inspires you and other people. So it makes me feel really good. It's true, you know, and I can't say enough good things about people I've been lucky enough to teach, from Vita Ayala to Mags to, you know, like a lot of Joelle Jones, and, you know, and that's just awesome. It's exciting, you know, Mike Morisi and all of them. It's really fun to look out there and be like, God, now I get to learn from them. So yeah, I would highly recommend it for anybody that gets a chance to teach. It really does, to me, it grounds you again and makes you makes you really think about who you want to be as a writer in that way.
That's really, I appreciate you sharing that. I was just kind of curious, and that sounds like it's very rewarding. That's awesome to hear. Scott, you've been incredibly generous with your time today. Thank you so much. What is coming up that you think we should like plug right now for people if they're interested in checking out some of your stuff? What are some of the near future things that they could be looking for from you?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, they should go back and look at your stuff because you have so many great videos on this channel that I hope if they're seeing this and they haven't gone back and looked at your backlist, like, please.
Nice of you.
But for me, I mean, I have a lot of stuff. Basically, right now, to sort of chop it up, I'm doing a bunch of books with Comixology, which is Amazon. It's the digital kind of comics platform that distributes pretty much almost all digital comics. Like, I mean, you can get your DC or Marvel through their apps, but generally most people get them through Comixology. So if you go to Comixology, what they're doing with me is we've signed a deal for 8 books, and then a few more coming next year. But essentially, 3 of those books are done. They're called We Have Demons, Clear, and Night of the Ghoul. We Have Demons, once they're done digitally, they come out in print from Dark Horse. I love Dark Horse. So We Have Demons came out digitally. It's with me and Greg Capullo, and then it came out in print from Dark Horse, so it's available. And then Night of the Ghoul, the second one to come out in print, the second issue of 3 just came out yesterday on Wednesday. And then Clear will be up next. That one comes out, me and Francis Manipal, in March. And they keep going that way. But the thing is, if you want to read them right now in digital, we're on our 6th. We have actually 7 of 8 are going right now. So for the price of 1 comic book, if you subscribe to Comixology, or if you already have a Prime account, you can read all of them for nothing. So,
and a lot of us do have a Prime account. So
yeah,
you can get some more comics.
Yeah, you can just read everything I'm doing over there digitally for free if you want. And then I have a book called Nocterra, which you mentioned, which is about a darkness covering the earth. It's big, kind of fun, over the top, pedal to the metal horror action with Tony Daniel, co-creator. And it's out from Image. It comes out, the next issue comes out this month, Val. It's a special, and then it starts up again in earnest in February. And yeah, and I teach over at Our Best Jacket, and I'm really enjoying that. So those are kind of the big things. And the reason I'm doing the Comixology stuff too is, you know, I really hope, I love them, and I love their deal. They have a great deal where they essentially, they pay a good rate, and then they allow you to keep the media rights for the books. So me and my co-creators own the rights to be able to take out for film and television.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, it's almost like I'm surprised more people don't talk about how the deal over there and how nice it is. But the reason I'm doing it on top of that, other than the fact that I really like the way it's set up, is that, you know, the same things we were talking about earlier. I love getting, you know, wrangling a little bit with people about like what might work in comics and how to make the industry stronger. And I certainly don't have the answers, and I know I'll get things wrong, but I really do believe that like this lane, this idea of trying to make things digitally available to browse in a big way will bring in a lot of younger readers, bring in a lot of people that shop the way we shop in other medium now. Where
like when we were kids, you could go into a convenience store or a supermarket, there would be comics. Well, where are people now? They are online. Certainly a lot of people use Amazon and Amazon Prime. So yeah, it's all about trying to find things at an affordable price and put in front of a reader that's young enough to get excited about it and create hopefully a fan of the medium for life. I think that what you're doing here is so important.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. If anyone out there checks out our books, like the hope is that you'll fall down the rabbit hole and find, you know, everything from Frank Miller to Brian Vaughan. They're all there on Comixology Unlimited to be able to browse. And so the idea when we signed up during the pandemic, especially, was like, you know, hopefully for the price of like 1 comic, people will go and fall in love with the hobby all over again, whether it's our books or other people's over there, and then have more money to spend when they go to the store to buy the collections, to buy new stuff by people that isn't available digitally yet, all of that. So, you know,
I'm of the opinion that a rising tide lifts all boats. So anything good for comics in general is good for everybody that works in it or reads it. So we'll see what happens.
Agreed. This was a pleasure, Chris. We got to do it again. I feel bad it's taken this long to actually connect.
Oh, hey, no, it's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, the fact is, you've made quite a name for yourself in the industry, so it's a real privilege to be able to pick your brain about technique and some of your history. So I appreciate it. I'd love to do it again sometime. Certainly wish you success because I've been enjoying your books. So for whatever that's worth to my viewers, yeah, there's a reason I actually have them here. It's because I'm actually reading Scott's stuff. So thank you so much for your time. Hope you have a great rest of your workday and time with your family.
You too, man. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please consider hitting like and subscribe. If you'd like to support the show, there are merchandise links beneath the YouTube video, and you can always hit join on YouTube or visit Comic Tropes on Patreon to get access to special perks.